My name is Laura Bennett, and I'm 46 years old. 3 nights ago, someone knocked on my door at 11:38 p.m. Not the polite kind of knock, the desperate kind, the kind that sounds like someone is running out of time. I almost didn't open it. I live alone in a quiet neighborhood outside Portland, and by that hour, most people around here are already asleep. The streetlights hum, the sidewalks are empty, and the only sound you usually hear is the wind through the pine trees. But whoever was outside my door wasn't leaving. The knocking came again, faster this time. I walked to the door slowly, not because I was scared, but because something in my stomach had already started to twist. Some instincts come from fear, others come from memory, and as I looked through the small glass panel beside the door, I felt the past hit me like cold water. Standing on my porch was a woman with wet hair stuck to her face, mascara streaked down her cheeks, her hands shaking so badly she could barely keep them still. My sister, Emily. The same sister who hadn't spoken to me in 8 years. The same sister who once sat across from me at my own kitchen table, held my hand while I cried about my failing marriage, and then slept with my husband the very same week. For a moment, neither of us moved. She just stood there breathing hard like she'd been running. Then she whispered through the glass, "Laura, please." I didn't open the door, not yet. Because the last time I trusted Emily, I had been lying in a hospital bed, and when I came home, my husband was gone, and so was she. But here she was again, 8 years later, knocking on my door in the middle of the night, crying, and whatever had happened to her had scared her badly enough to come back to the one person she'd betrayed the most. I opened the door halfway. "What do you want?" I asked. My voice sounded calm. It surprised both of us. Emily's lips trembled. I didn't know where else to go. I stared at her for a long moment, because that sentence meant something very different coming from her. 8 years ago, she had somewhere else to go. She had my husband. She had my life. And she took both while I was lying in a hospital bed after surgery. Trusting the two people who promised they loved me, I crossed my arms. "You have 5 seconds to tell me why you're here." She swallowed hard. Then the words fell out of her mouth so fast they almost tripped over each other. "Mark left me." The name hung between us like broken glass. Mark, my ex-husband, the man she stole, the man who disappeared from my life the same day she did. For a second, I thought I might laugh. Instead, I said the only thing that came to mind. 8 years, I said quietly. You vanished for 8 years, and now you show up at my door because the man you stole from me finally left you? Her eyes filled with fresh tears. It's worse than that. I leaned against the doorframe. I doubt that. She shook her head quickly. No, Laura, you don't understand. And then she said something that made the air leave my lungs. He didn't just leave. She looked over her shoulder toward the dark street behind her like someone might be watching. Then she whispered, "He took everything." For the first time since opening the door, my curiosity pushed past my anger. Everything. I studied her carefully. The expensive clothes she used to wear were gone. Her coat was thin, her hands were trembling, and for the first time in her life, Emily looked like someone who had run out of options. I stepped aside slowly. 5 minutes, I said. That's all you get. She walked inside like a ghost, returning to a house that used to be hers. And as the door closed behind her, I realized something strange. For 8 years, I had imagined what it would feel like if I ever saw her again. I imagined screaming, throwing things, demanding answers, but instead, I just felt tired. Because the truth is, the real story didn't start tonight. It started 8 years ago. The day I woke up in a hospital bed after emergency surgery and realized my sister and my husband had disappeared together. And the worst part, the betrayal didn't begin there. It began long before that. Long before I ever knew what they were capable of. 8 years earlier, I woke up to the smell of antiseptic and the slow, steady beep of a heart monitor. For a few seconds, I didn't remember where I was. Then the pain hit. A deep, aching pressure across my abdomen that made it feel like my body had been stitched together with wire. My mouth was dry, my throat raw, and when I tried to move, a nurse immediately appeared beside the bed. "Easy," she said gently. "You just came out of surgery." Surgery, right. The gallbladder attack had come out of nowhere. 1 minute I was making dinner, the next I was on the kitchen floor, unable to breathe. Mark had called the ambulance. Emily had driven to the hospital. At the time, I thought I was lucky. Most people didn't have a husband and a sister who showed up that quickly when something went wrong. But that was before I understood what kind of people they really were. I blinked slowly, trying to clear the fog from my head. "Where's my husband?" I asked. The nurse glanced toward the door. "Your sister was here earlier," she said. "She said your husband stepped out to get coffee." That sounded normal enough. Mark hated hospitals. The smell, the waiting, the quiet tension in the hallways, it always made him restless. Emily, on the other hand, thrived in situations where she could look helpful. She'd been like that our entire lives. Growing up, Emily was the charming one, the one teachers adored, the one neighbors complimented, the one who could smile sweetly while quietly making sure the attention always landed on her. I was the older sister, the responsible one, the steady one, the one who cleaned up messes no one else wanted to deal with. Even back then, our roles had been clear. Emily shined, I supported, and for most of my life, I believed that was just how things were supposed to be. The nurse checked my IV. You should rest, she said. Your husband will be back soon. But Mark didn't come back. Not that hour, not that evening, and not the next morning either. At first, I wasn't worried. Hospitals are confusing places. People step out. Phones die. Messages get missed. By the second day, though, the feeling in my stomach wasn't just surgical pain anymore. It was something colder. I called Mark's phone, straight to voicemail. I tried again. Same thing. Finally, I called Emily. She picked up immediately. Laura, she said, her voice bright and almost too cheerful. How are you feeling? Tired, I said. Where's Mark? There was a pause, just long enough to notice. Oh, she said quickly. He went home to grab some things. Your pajamas, your toothbrush. You know how he is. He wanted to make sure you're comfortable. That sounded like Mark. He was practical, quiet, reliable, the kind of man who fixed broken things without being asked. That was one of the reasons I'd fallen in love with him. When we met 12 years earlier, he had felt like stability, like someone who would never hurt me. Looking back now, I realize how easily trust can turn into blindness. Okay, I said. Tell him to call me. Of course, Emily replied, but Mark didn't call. By the third day in the hospital, something inside me had shifted from concern to dread. My doctor said the surgery had gone well. Another day of observation, then I could go home. Home. The word suddenly felt strange, because Mark still hadn't answered his phone. Emily stopped visiting, and every message I left sounded more desperate than the last. When the hospital finally discharged me, I took a taxi home. The ride felt longer than usual. Every traffic light seemed to hold us in place for an eternity. When the car finally turned onto my street, I felt something in my chest tighten. The house looked normal, the same blue shutters, the same rose bushes I planted years earlier. But the moment I stepped inside, I knew something was wrong. The air felt empty, not quiet, empty. I walked slowly through the living room. The couch was still there, the television, the framed wedding photo on the wall. But when I reached the bedroom door, my hand stopped on the knob. Something was missing. I opened it anyway. Half the closet was empty. Mark sighed, his clothes, his shoes. The suitcase he used for business trips. Gone. At first, my brain refused to process it. I just stood there staring at the empty hangers like they might magically fill themselves again. Then I noticed something else. Emily's favorite scarf. The red one she wore every winter. It wasn't in the guest room where she'd left it the last time she visited. It was lying on my bedroom floor, right next to Mark's empty side of the closet. My phone buzzed in my hand, a message from Emily. I opened it slowly. The words were short, cruel in their simplicity. We didn't mean for it to happen this way. My heart started pounding so hard it made my surgical stitches ache. Another message appeared immediately after. We're in love. That was it. No apology, no explanation, just those two sentences. I remember sliding down the wall and sitting on the bedroom floor because my legs suddenly couldn't hold me anymore, not because of the pain, but because the two people I trusted most in the world had just rewritten my life with 8 words. We're in love. It's strange how betrayal works. People imagine rage, screaming, breaking things, but the truth is much quieter. The truth is sitting alone on the floor of your own bedroom, realizing the people you loved most had been standing behind you with knives you never saw. And that day, as the sun set through the window of the house I thought was my home, I made a promise to myself. I would never chase them, never beg them to come back, never give them the satisfaction of watching me fall apart. If they wanted my life, they could take it, but they would never get to see what it cost me. What I didn't know then was that the story between the 3 of us was far from over, because 8 years later, Emily would show up at my door again, and this time she would be the one who had lost everything. The first night in that house after they left was the quietest night of my life. Not peaceful quiet, the kind of quiet that presses against your ears until you start hearing things that aren't there. I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, my brain replayed the same questions. How long? When did it start? How could I not see it? But the most painful question was the simplest one. Why? Mark had been my husband for 12 years. Emily had been my sister for my entire life. And somehow those two relationships had turned into something else behind my back, while I was still calling them the two people I trusted most in the world. The next morning, I woke up on the bedroom floor. My stitches ached, my head pounded, and for a moment I forgot everything. Then I saw the empty closet again, and reality came rushing back. I stood up slowly, holding the edge of the dresser for support. The house felt enormous without another person inside it. Every sound echoed, the refrigerator humming, the clock ticking in the hallway, the floorboards creaking under my feet. I walked into the kitchen and found the coffee machine still set from the morning Mark had called the ambulance. Two mugs sat on the counter, mine and his. I stared at them for a long time. Then I picked them both up and put them in the sink. That was the first thing I did after my life fell apart. I washed 2 coffee cups. It sounds small, but that moment taught me something important. When your world collapses, the only way forward is through the smallest possible steps. Wash the dishes, make the bed, breathe, survive the next hour. Everything else comes later. The messages from Emily kept coming for a few days. Long paragraphs about feelings, about how love sometimes happens unexpectedly, about how she never meant to hurt me. I didn't respond to any of them. What was the point? Some betrayals don't deserve conversations, they deserve silence. Eventually, the messages stopped. Then the calls stopped. And just like that, my sister and my husband disappeared from my life. The divorce paperwork arrived 3 months later. Mark had hired a lawyer. The envelope looked cold and official sitting in my mailbox. Inside was a short letter and a stack of legal documents. There was also a handwritten note from Mark. Just 3 lines. I never meant for you to find out this way. I hope someday you'll understand. Understand what? That he fell in love with my sister? That they had probably been seeing each other long before I ended up in the hospital? That the moment my life became inconvenient, he replaced me with someone easier? I didn't write back. I signed the papers, and that was the end of my marriage. The following years were strange. For a long time, people treated me like I was fragile. Friends spoke softly around me. Neighbors avoided mentioning Emily or Mark like their names were dangerous. But life kept moving. It always does. I went back to work. I stopped wearing my wedding ring. I repainted the bedroom. Little by little, the house stopped feeling like the place where my life had ended, and started feeling like the place where a different one had begun. I never dated again, not because I hated men, but because the idea of trusting someone like that again felt exhausting. Instead, I built something quieter, something simpler, a life that belonged entirely to me. By the time 8 years had passed, the anger was mostly gone, not forgiven, just distant, like a scar that no longer hurt unless you pressed on it. Most days I didn't even think about Emily or Mark. I had heard small pieces of news over the years through relatives. They had moved to another state. Mark started a small construction business. Emily worked part-time at a real estate office. From the outside, their life sounded normal, happy, even, and for a long time that bothered me. It felt unfair, like they had stolen everything and still managed to land on their feet. But eventually I stopped caring, because the truth is, the best revenge isn't watching someone else fall. It's realizing you don't need them to. Until 3 nights ago, when Emily showed up on my doorstep crying, and told me Mark had taken everything. Back in the present, she sat at my kitchen table looking like someone who had walked through a storm. I placed a mug of tea in front of her. She wrapped both hands around it like she needed the warmth to stay upright. Neither of us spoke for a moment. The silence between us felt heavier than any argument. Finally, I leaned against the counter and crossed my arms. "You have 4 minutes left," I said. Emily nodded slowly. "I deserve that." I didn't respond. She took a shaky breath. "Mark's business collapsed last year." I raised an eyebrow. "That's unfortunate." "It wasn't just the business," she said quietly. "He started gambling." That word landed differently, because suddenly the pieces began to shift. "How bad?" I asked. Emily laughed bitterly. "Bad enough that he emptied our savings. Bad enough that he took loans in my name. Bad enough that when everything crashed, he disappeared." For a moment, I almost felt something like sympathy. Almost. "Where did he go?" I asked. Her eyes filled with tears again. "That's the problem," she whispered. "We don't know." I frowned. "We." She swallowed. "The police." The room went still, because suddenly the situation felt much bigger than a failed marriage. "What did he do, Emily?" Her hands trembled around the mug. "He didn't just lose money," she said. "He borrowed from the wrong people." The kitchen suddenly felt colder, and, I said slowly, Emily looked at me with the same frightened expression she used to have as a child when she knew she had done something terrible. And they think I know where he is. The words hung in the air between us. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then I realized something. She hadn't come here because Mark left her. She came because she was in trouble. Real trouble. The kind that